What's going on, people? Georgio Savvides here, founder of the Hip Hop Orchestra, as well as the host of the Hip Hop Orchestra Presents podcast. And I got a really exciting announcement to finally make with everyone, is that we have our very first official sponsor for the podcast. Now, they are an amazing company called Odin's Vote, who are extremely dedicated in bringing you the very best in officially licensed merchandise from pop culture. And when I mean the very best, I mean the very best. They provide things like keyrings, caps, t-shirts, to Funko Pops, to statues from all over, such as DC, Marvel, Disney, The Mandalorian, Harry Potter, music artists from all over the place, and they are ridiculously good. I've got a couple of things to show you on offer at the moment. This trust with their stuff is amazing. So, t-shirts, like I mentioned, like the one I'm wearing right now. It's got Rocky right here, which I absolutely love. Or, like I said, also got Funko Pops as well, 3.75 inches and 10 inches. I've got a couple of 10 inches right here for you. I've got Post Malone right here, and I've also got Biggie right here, who I absolutely love. These are so sick. Odin's Vote, trust me, they are amazing. Now, I'm going to leave the link below in the video right here, and also in the description below as well in all future videos from the podcast. But trust me, Odin's Vote are amazing. Website is www.odinsvote.co.uk. Get in touch with them now and start buying ASAP. But also, before I forget as well, I just want to say the biggest thank you to Odin's Vote for sponsoring the podcast. It means the absolute world to me. Thank you. And trust me, get in touch with them right now. And I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And peace. Welcome to another brand new edition of Hip Hop Orchestra Presents. We're joined by an amazing guest today, freelance journalist and researcher for the BBC, Olivia Otigbah. How are you? Okay?
I'm fine. Thank you so much for having me.
That's an absolute pleasure. How's things been?
Thank
Okay?
you. Yes, I'm fine. Thank you. How are you?
Yeah, you know what? I'm doing good, thank you. I'm doing really well,
Good.
thank you. But let's start with a positive note, though. I want to start off by saying a huge congratulations on your recent appointment as researcher for the BBC.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been a long road, but I've got my toe in the door, so
Yeah,
hopefully it'll stay there. But
I
thank
will.
you very much.
Well, a pleasure. How you feeling? You must be over the moon.
Yeah, I'm really happy about it. It's something I've wanted to do for years. It's always been kind of a goal of mine since I was younger to get into broadcast or television. So again, it's a very early stages, but I'm just grateful to, again, have my foot in the door. So
That's fantastic. You fully deserve it because the work you do is absolutely amazing. So you fully deserve
thank
it.
you.
My
Thank you.
pleasure. And did you start in September? Is that correct?
Yes, I
Yeah.
started in September. I've been there almost 3 months, two and a half months now. Yeah.
Wow. How's it been so far? Has it gone really quickly for you?
It has gone really quickly. The show I was working on was BBC Debate Night. It's the Scottish version of Question Time. It's the same team though as Question Time. That's ended its series. I get in trouble for saying season because I used to watch all these American shows.
Yeah.
It's the end of the series. So it's ended now until January, but it should be back in January. And at the moment, I've just transitioned over to the news team to do a bit of research and work on their social media.
Okay. How's that transition been for you? Was it quite a big shock to the system? Or was it quite similar in terms of what you had to do in terms of your work?
Well, I think the good thing about BBC is they're really supportive in any career moves that you do have. So if you do want to move around, it's quite easy to do so. So it wasn't a huge transition. My manager on debate nights actually moved back to that team as well. So it's good to kind of know somebody that's already in that team. And I've met some great new people in the past few weeks. That's been quite a recent move. It's only been the last week or two. But I've met some amazing people and hopefully, yeah, it will go well and I can transition even further.
Oh, amazing. That's fantastic. And were you working on research debate night for long during your first stint there?
So I worked on it before while I was at university a couple of years ago, about almost 2 years ago now. I worked on the first series Got to know the editor there and got to know the various different people. It's quite a small, tight-knit community in Scotland. I think in journalism and broadcast, everyone kind of knows everybody. That's probably my biggest tip as well, is to build up as many contacts as you can possibly get. So yeah, knew the editor, was speaking to him, let him know what I was doing, and he knew of a position coming up for debate night as a researcher. So submitted my CV and all of that jazz to my manager and got the role.
Brilliant. And when working for the BBC, do they allow you to continue to work yourself in the way that works best for you, or are they quite kind of, in a way, regimented in how you approach the work that you do?
But I think with every job, with every corporation or business, you've got a business model that you like everyone to follow, so it's consistent. So obviously, in a way, you've got to follow the BBC prototype or business model. That's to be expected. But they are, like I said, they're very supportive. They are very supportive of your career progression, and they will help you get there. So there is room to kind of submit your ideas. Everyone's always willing to listen. They're just a really nice bunch, to be
Oh,
honest.
that's brilliant. That's so good to hear. And when you did send in your application, did they follow up with ask you to do, say, a specific job to get you that job that you got in the end, or did they just look at your CV or your amazing work and then take it from there?
Again, I would say for me, I was quite lucky that I whenever I'm working on something, I make sure that I get to know a few people. Network. My biggest tip to anybody, especially in this industry, is to network, network, network.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I said, I got to know the editor of that debate night series, the first one. Again, I'd kind of kept in touch with him, just checking in about any job opportunities, and then he put me in touch with the manager for debate night. This time round, there was a short interview, and it was just a CV submission.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it really depends what kind of role you're going for, I think.
Oh, okay, fair enough. And have you been able to work through this initial lockdown as well, or do you have to work from home at the moment?
No, we have been, because we're kind of classed as business critical, because obviously the show needs to go on air. So I have been in the office with BBC, which I've really enjoyed because I do have another job as well, and I've been working from home. So it's been nice to get back out and be around people again, if that makes sense.
Okay, of course, yeah. I'm a teacher myself as well at the same time, as well as one of the orchestra.
Yeah.
So being around people is such a great feeling, isn't it? I know that obviously a lot of people are working from home, which they do prefer as well. But I know what you mean. That just being around people makes the whole process a lot easier, doesn't it? In the end.
Yes, exactly, and it's nice to get out after lockdown, because I feel like being away from human contact for too long isn't good for us at all. So
Of
it's been
course.
nice.
I mean, how was lockdown for you? Was it okay for you? Were you coping okay?
I think overall, I think I would say it's been about 60-40. So I think I've made the most of any opportunity that I've had in lockdown. It's been quite nice to have extra time to work on projects and to be creative and to work on content. It has been very up and down. I think there's been some times where, you just want your life to start again and to get back out there. But I think for me, I've really just tried to find as many opportunities as I can, working from home, or keep in contact with people, like I said, whether that's at BBC or other publications, and just try and network during lockdown.
Fantastic. And you said you work on other projects. We got a different job as well.
Yeah.
What else you working on at the moment, if you're allowed
So
to say?
so I do my freelance work as well on the side. So I write articles, I've got my own website, I've got my own podcast, I do a lot of bits and pieces on social media as well. But I do actually still work at a bank as
Oh,
well,
do you?
because that job got me through university, and I was meant to leave to move to London to work for two publications. And literally on the last day, on the first day of lockdown, that lockdown was announced, I was meant to leave my job. So I had to run into the office, because otherwise I wouldn't have had a pay to get me through lockdown. And luckily they rescinded my notice period. So I was meant to move to London, but unfortunately that fell through. So I did keep my other part-time role. I work at BBC and I do freelance.
Wow. I mean, how do you juggle so many things at the same time?
I don't. It can be a struggle, but I just try and schedule everything, and I enjoy doing it.
Mhm.
So I think that's the main thing: is if you enjoy doing something, it doesn't really feel like work.
Of course.
But I just try and schedule things for the days that I have off, or the days that I can do something. I'll try and do at least one little bit a day. So
Hmm. Talk about your podcast. Actually, I listened to your recent episode with Doctor.
I've
Oh,
been to show girl.
Shigel, yeah,
Yeah,
fantastic,
she's
really
lovely.
fantastic
Thank
episode.
you.
And also speaking about the does social media impact on mental health, which is something that I see you do a lot of work on in your website as well. How
Yeah.
did you find the episode? It was fantastic for me. How did you find it?
It was great. It's something that I've discussed. I do quite a lot of work on Instagram, and I, chat to my followers quite a lot. I don't have that many, to be honest. I'm not gonna sit here and say I'm like an influencer or anything like that. I only have like 1,200 followers on Instagram. But I've got a really good community on Instagram where everybody does like to discuss different topics and they're really interested in things. So I had put a poll up a couple of weeks prior about what people thought about Instagram filters. So
Mm,
I just thought, wouldn't it be great to get a professional to talk about, a psychologist or a psychiatrist to talk about the effect it has on our mental health and our psyche, basically. Dr. Parvinder Shergill kindly answered my call for that,
mm,
and we sat down to the podcast. So I thought it was great from a professional perspective to find
mm,
out just how much that really does affect our day-to-day life and our mental health.
mm. And even before you put the poll up as well, was this something that you wanted to talk about for a while as well with someone?
Yeah, because I mean, I've been there myself, where, I think when I was a little bit younger, I would use a lot of these. When Snapchat first came out, I think I mentioned this in the podcast. When Snapchat first came out, I would use filters a lot. And it did get to the point where it did almost become an addiction for me to use these filters
Hmm.
because, you start to look at your face and you're like, okay, well, my nose doesn't look that small without a filter, or when the filter comes off, you always hear those jokes about when the filter moves off, you think, whoa, like that's not me, but
Yeah.
that is me. And it's been something I've wanted to talk about for years. And I definitely want to do more research and more work on it because it's affected me personally at one point.
Yeah. I mean, has your kind of outlook on social media changed since your talk with Dr. Pavinda at all?
Um, I wouldn't say it's changed, but it's just given me more awareness. Again, it's kind of like a lengthy journey of research that I'm doing to understand it a little bit more. I wouldn't say it's changed because I was already aware of how it does affect people, being a woman as well. I've got a lot of female friends, obviously, and we do talk about this quite a lot, photos and how we feel and our mental health and how we look in pictures, or just being on, even for my friends who have businesses, I discuss it with them. If they use social media a lot, how do you switch off? Where do you find that time to just relax? And you'll probably know yourself from doing a lot on social media. Sometimes you do just need to
Mm,
unplug and go and spend like 2 hours watching TV or something. So it hasn't changed, but I definitely say my awareness has become greater through speaking
mm.
to her, definitely.
Yeah. How do you unplug personally? You said you watch TV as well. Is there anything else that you do personally to kind of just move away from all the social media?
I find it quite difficult. I'm not going to lie, I'm going to be honest. I find it quite difficult because again, I do a lot of content. So again, you're always on your laptop, or I need to use social media for inspiration or if I want to check something. So I do find it hard. It's actually this month I just took a kind of month break. I'm slowly getting back into it. But I did get to the point where I said, actually I think you need just like a break and not worry, because I really worry when it's probably my own anxiety, but I really worry when I'm not replying to people, or I reply back late, and then you want to engage, but at the same time, you've got your real life to live, and
Mm,
so I do find it difficult. But when I unplug, yeah, I do just like to maybe sit and read up on articles that I find interesting, or research things, or watch TV, and or hang out with my friends, and yeah.
mm. I know that on your website as well, you mentioned obviously a couple of other bits as well, which I want to get into.
Yeah.
But one of the things you mentioned was one of the things. Another thing was you posted the question: Is our love affair with social media really coming to an end? Which was
Yeah.
released obviously the week after Caroline Flack's passing.
Yes, it was.
Yeah. Do you feel like what's your current state on this situation? Do you feel like people are losing their love for social media, or do you feel like it's still as popular as ever?
Well, like I said, it's definitely been a journey with me. I mean, that was written, like you said, almost a year ago after Caroline Flack's passing. So it's been a bit of a journey understanding it, and I'm going to continue to do more work to try and understand it. I don't think maybe now that we're losing our love for social media, because it's a staple in our lives now. Like we need it. We almost need it. You need it if you have to run a business. You need it to catch up with your friends. You need it to catch up on the news. Even now, you need social media. But I do think people are becoming more aware and more balanced about how too much of a good thing I like to think about it as. You know, I think people are now becoming aware of, okay, I've spent 8 hours today on social media and maybe it is getting too much. And they're now finding that kind of social media life balance, and it's maybe not as much of a need, even though it is. I don't know if I've explained that
No,
very
no,
well.
you really have there, because
If you know what I mean. Yeah.
yeah, of course I do, because you also mentioned in the same column, sorry, that you mentioned that it's clear that
Yeah.
society is irritated and something needs to change. However,
Yeah.
is it the ill management of social media platforms at fault, or is it our own personal relationship with social media which is impacting us? What do you think? Is that still true today in your mind? Do you think, or do you think it's kind of changed slightly recently?
I think me and Dr. Parvinder Shergill did touch on this a little bit. She's been doing amazing work alongside Parliament to look at regulation and how and whose responsibility it is to regulate social media. Now, I do think there needs to be more regulation on social media, especially for young people. I touched on this a little bit as well in the podcast. When I was younger, even, we didn't really have social media to the extent that you have it now. So I think we had Bebo or something, and that was the first mention of cyberbullying, was like Bebo and MySpace, but it wasn't as prevalent as it is now, especially now that we're all very image orientated and focused. But I also think it is a personal responsibility, and again, we touched on that, and Dr. Parvinder made a really great point. If it is affecting you, you should recognise that and maybe remove yourself for a little while. I think it's a dual responsibility. I do think we need to look at more regulation, but I also think as people, we need to be more self-aware of what our own triggers are. And like me, it was getting a little bit much for me last month. I was constantly replying to people and then trying to do my content and trying to make content and working 2 jobs at the same time. So I did just say, okay, right, it doesn't matter if your engagement goes down. I also think, just a point as well, I also think a good point to make is it's, for me, the ownership does also lie with these social media tech bosses. So they're making it harder now for us to switch off. I don't know if you saw The Social Dilemma.
I really want to watch that, actually. Haven't seen it
You
yet,
need to
girl.
watch it.
Yeah.
It honestly, it makes you, it stays with you. It's one of those ones that just stays with you. But I think it is a fault of them as well, in the sense that, like on Instagram, for example, they'll drop your engagement if you're not constantly online. And that, to me, is just, they don't realize, or maybe they do, but they don't realize how much of an effect that's having on people's mental health, you know, because if you're seeing, you're like, no one's looking at my stuff, and, you know, like, why is that person getting, and it creates this competition, unnecessary competition with others and with yourself, that's maybe a little bit unnecessary.
I really need to watch the documentary because I've heard so much
It's
about
amazing.
it. Yeah.
So good.
And does it ever mention actually what the future does hold for social media? I know you see this as part of a staple of life now, which is a good and bad thing in a way. Obviously, everything has good and bad points, obviously, but in the documentary, does it ever mention what the future does hold for social media in a sense?
I think, if I remember correctly, at the end, because what I thought was great about it is they interviewed actual ex-employees of these social media apps. So they had all the insider knowledge. They knew exactly how it worked. They knew exactly what the aims of the companies were or are. I don't think anyone knows. That's the thing I picked up from it. I think everyone agreed at the end that, like we're saying, there needs to be greater regulation and greater awareness from these companies. But let's be honest, it's probably not going to go anywhere. It's evolved to such a point where our whole, especially during lockdown, that's highlighted it even more. We rely on social platforms. So I don't think they even know where
Mm.
it's going to go, but I think everyone agrees that the effect that it's having, especially on young people, but on our mental health, I think that needs to be looked at in greater detail, and
Yeah,
people need to be held accountable.
definitely. Because I know that for some reason, I just thought that documentary Game Changers, where it mentions about the vegan diet that everyone's doing now.
Yeah.
And yeah, and obviously, that's obviously different to social media, obviously. But to me, it seems like that documentary where everyone is talking about being a vegan now,
Mhm.
but then a lot of that documentary was actually fake. So it's crazy to think about what's going on now with social media and everything around the world. It's crazy.
Well, we picked up on, I think, when I came off that podcast, there's so much that you could talk about with it. I mean, when you're talking about the vegan diet and people following trends, I guess that goes more into the fake news and
Mm.
the political side of things. And so that's a whole an even separate conversation, which I'd love to have with Dr. Parvinder or another psychiatrist or even a social media tech employee to see how it's also influencing our political sphere and our mindsets as well, and fake news. So that's a whole different comedy. There's just so much that you could sit and talk about, really.
It really is. I mean, talk about that fake news. Actually, you being a researcher and a journalist as well, how do you really confirm what is true and what is fake from everything else?
Mhm.
Do you trust social media at all, or do you literally have to go out personally and research beyond social media and stuff? Because we know that obviously a lot of people do post obviously fake news on social
Mhm.
media. What's your take on it, and how do you kind of make sure that everything we hear and see is the truth?
Never rely on social media for your sources
Mm.
unless it's somebody who you're going out to interview. And even at that, in journalism training, you're told to go and get at least two quotes and try and get them where they're kind of opposites of each other. So you want one opinion and you want another, and then people can read it and make up their mind. So I would never use social media as a sole source for an article or for research. What we're taught to do is go to trusted sources. So organizations, so like who've run proper statistics and proper studies. Also, you could go to your kind of top news sites like The Guardian. Obviously, you wouldn't copy their articles, but you would go and have a look at what they've written about a couple of years prior. You would maybe have a look at who they contacted or interviewed, and then you would go and research all of these different reputable organizations and companies who have done guaranteed research. And then you would obviously phone the heads of these companies or someone who works there, and you would talk to them, or you would run your own studies. But I would never use social media as a sole source of
Mm.
information.
Okay, because now that you're at the BBC as well, do you feel like the research you have to put forward has to be turned over in really quick time, or do they allow you to make sure that everything you put forward is obviously genuine and official?
I mean, as a journalist, it's always got to be genuine and official. I
Yeah.
mean, that's your role. A lot of people now write online and they put things out there, and that's great.
Mm.
But the role of a journalist really is to make sure that your facts are as watertight as they can be. Obviously, things can change,
Mhm.
and there have obviously been instances in journalistic history or journalism history where you know facts have emerged later on which may contradict the original article or something like that. So you're always going to get that to some degree, but as a journalist, it really is your responsibility to go out there and, like you said, speak to people who are in the know, verify what they've said with another opinion. And it's really, there's a couple of layers before you get to that point. So in terms of BBC, of course, they're going to make sure that everything that they put out
Yeah.
has been verified and double checked and triple checked and researched. Yeah.
Mm. And talk about social media again, actually, for a bit more, actually. Do you feel that social media has kind of affected people's ability to be, for lack of a better word, kind of criticized in a way for maybe their work or anything like that?
It's such a dual reality, I think, that we're living in because you meet so many great people on social media. I mean, like, again, I always say to interviewees, like, we wouldn't have met if it wasn't for
Mm.
social media. And you really do find your tribe who are doing similar things and who support each other. And that's a really nice thing when you
Hmm.
find people who do understand your grind or, the work you're trying to do. But I think maybe for younger people, it's a lot harder, you know, maybe if you're still at school or you're in the very early stages of university and you're trying to do things and people don't really understand. And so I definitely think there's a dual tone to that, or a polar opposite reality, in the sense that, yeah, you find your tribe. But of course, if you're putting things out there, you're opening yourself up to criticism,
Hmm.
100%.
Yeah. And being a journalist as well, do you have to be kind of very strong in what you put forward, or the reason why I ask is because are there any kind of projects that you want to put forward yourself, but thought maybe it's not the right thing to be put forward?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously, again, I'm still quite a new journalist, so I'm
Yeah,
not going to deny that I'm still learning myself, and
yeah,
you know, it's trial and there's going to be times where I make mistakes, and there's going to be times where I have to learn from those mistakes. So I'll be very honest and say that I am still a baby in the industry, so to
yeah.
say, so to speak. Yeah, there are times where I'll maybe have an idea, and you do have to introduce a little bit of logic to what you're putting out there. You know, I've got great mentors who I can go to for a second opinion, and there have been times where they've said, well, you know, have you thought about that, and have you thought about this? And I have so many ideas that I write down which don't get published or I don't
Mm,
get round to. So yeah, there are times where I'll maybe rescind an idea, but um, you do have to introduce that logic to it. And there's also the element of being current and what's newsworthy. So it is quite a fast-paced industry.
mm. I was going to ask you about who helped inspire you and mentor you as well. So coming up in your journey so far, who did sort of inspire and mentor you along the way?
I've had so many. Any journalist that I meet who's done a great job inspires me,
Mm,
and who's helped me along the way inspires me, because at the end of the day, they know better than me. They've been in the industry maybe for 10, 20 years. So anybody who has the knowledge and who's made a great career out of it always inspires me. My one mentor that I've had, she's called Tanya Gold. She's an amazing journalist. Follow her if you can. She's really helped me over the past year, and she's been brutally honest. You know, if I've had a bad cover letter, she's like, too wordy, rip it up, like start
Wow.
again. I need that, you know, I need that. She's told me kind of all the insider little bits and pieces to watch out for, how to approach things. Again, I've worked with some great people at the Scotsman and Evening News in Edinburgh, Stephen Wilkie and Ian Pope as well, and they always kept me right. And they're very honest and they give great constructive feedback.
Mm,
And again, my colleagues at the BBC as well are being very supportive. So I've had once you get to know people in this industry, like I
mm,
said, that's my biggest tip. Definitely go and build a network base.
mm.
But once you know people and they know you, there's not a shortage at all of support and advice.
It's true what you said, that sometimes you need that person who will just be like sort of brutally honest with you and just,
Yeah,
yeah. And that's exactly the reason why I asked if you, as being a journalist, you have to be that kind of strong-willed person to say, look, I really feel genuinely important about this particular piece of work. Can I put it forward? And
yeah.
it must be so hard though to put certain things forward. Like you said, you've got so many things to talk about, but you haven't put forward just yet. It must be
Yeah.
such a difficult thing to actually work on.
But it's good to always bank things, because you never know when things will come back up. But yeah, I do think, especially, that's kind of why I set up my own website, and I don't get paid for it at all. I just do it because I want to do it. It keeps up my skills, and that gives me the freedom to write about what I want to write about a little bit more as well, which is good, because there's some things which especially I think being mixed race or ethnic, you know, before the Black Lives Matter protest, you know, there wasn't a whole lot in the media. Obviously, we do still talk about it, but maybe there wasn't as much in the media about kind of issues relating to colour or race. And even before then, there was issues that I talked about, which I thought were important. Like I wrote an article on the term BAME and whether
Mm,
people actually like and support that term, and why we're using it all of a sudden if nobody agrees with it. And that was before, you know, the Black Lives Matter protest. And I thought that was relevant, and my followers really enjoyed that article. So
mm.
it's good to have that freedom on my
It
own
is,
platform.
yeah.
So
Because I saw a lot of the work that you were doing on your website. It really is fantastic. It's so good and so honest as well. And I wanted to ask you actually personally as well, if you found any particular subjects more difficult to talk about than others.
more difficult. I'm a very open book, so I don't really find things that difficult to talk
Mm,
about. Maybe my interviewees have, but I'm not too sure. I would say the one that I wasn't too sure about actually was the dealing with being different article that I did on racism in Scotland. So
mm,
I got loads of case studies and I included a little bit about myself, but I didn't want to make it all about my experience. And we talked about our experiences with racism and being in Scotland. And that one at the start, I wasn't too sure if I wanted to. No, I wasn't too sure, but you don't want to run the risk of also offending people from your past or people kind of being like, oh, she's talking about me. But then I thought, well, no, it's a really important topic that we need to talk about. And if people from your past or in your hometown have perpetrated racism at any point, and now that we're older, maybe they didn't realize at the time, or maybe it was ignorance, but it's also a really important topic to talk about so people do realize that certain words and actions can really affect people. So
mm.
that's why I put that out. Yeah.
Definitely. 'Cause I remember also you talk about BAME as well, those sort of things as well, and
Okay.
you purposely yes, and you obviously purposely didn't
Yeah.
say apply for jobs that were looking for particular obviously race and so forth. And now you're working at the BBC, obviously, which is fantastic. Do you
Thank
feel
you.
it's a pleasure? Like I said, you fully deserve the work you do. You put out there is amazing.
Thank you.
It's
I
okay.
hope so. That's
No, no,
that's
it
the aim.
is. It
That's
is.
the aim. Gotta
And
cut through self-doubt.
exactly. There we go. Because you said obviously that you felt particularly in two minds about putting out that work there. Did you feel a lot better once you did put it out there, though?
100%. I got so many good responses. And actually, like I said, I just thought it was really important to talk about that, regardless of whether it made people feel uncomfortable. It's not about that because these experiences for myself and for my case studies that I interviewed were very real experiences. So if it makes people feel uncomfortable, then good, because we
Yeah.
need to talk about where the line is between banter sometimes and outright racism. There's a broad spectrum there, which we need to discuss. The BAME one as well didn't gain as much traction actually as the deal with being different one, but it's something I would like to discuss again because everybody I've asked does not like that acronym,
Yeah.
including myself.
Yeah.
But it seems to still be used. So I definitely want to revisit that one at some point. But yeah, I don't. Not that I don't agree with applying, but just I want to be seen for my talent. I don't just want to be hired for my skin color, and that's just a personal
Mm.
preference. Of course, it's good when you see. I've kind of changed. I go back and forward on this one because there are sometimes opportunities where they're looking for an ethnic writer, say, to talk about an experience or to go and interview a community. And when I have those tools at my disposal, of course, it'll be great to use them. So I have changed my mind a little bit on that. But at the same time, the acronym for me just groups far too
Mm.
many ethnicities into one box, which I feel is quite ignorant.
It
So
is because
I'm
that's my apologies for saying it because I know that I do remember now that you obviously wrote on your website. I do apologise for using that term there.
no, it's fine.
Uh,
Like it's used.
yeah.
I'm one person out of so many people, so I can't stop everybody using it. It's just again, it's interesting to see what actual ethnic people's opinion is on this acronym. Yeah.
Mm. But it's so true what you said though that you should get hired just for your talents and not your skin color. Because, like I
Mm-hmm.
said, you're obviously you said obviously being mixed race and stuff in an area where it was predominantly white. You said, and you didn't
Yeah.
want to apply for such jobs. So it's
Mm-hmm.
so true what you said that you shouldn't get hired just because of your skin color, but your talents instead. So what you're
Mm-hmm.
doing is the correct thing. So that's why I highly admire what you do. Really, I
Thank
really
you.
do. My
Thank
pleasure.
you. I remember when I got the BBC thing, you could probably still see this comment and calling them out. You
Yeah.
could probably still see this comment on the post pinned at the top of it. It's my most proud post. But
Yeah.
someone said to me, they were like, "Oh, you do know that people are always only going to be thinking you got the job because you're mixed race." And I just thought like that didn't even come up in the interview with my manager. He didn't want to say, we're hiring all these ethnic people and we want you to be a part of it. That didn't even come up. It was a normal interview. And if I just think if that's the case, then how have I got every job that I've worked at in my
Mm.
life? I don't
It's
think
so
every single
true.
employer was ticking boxes like that. So
Yeah, I mean, how do you feel personally when people say that to you so openly as well on a platform like Twitter? Because I saw the pinned tweet, obviously, but how do you feel when people say that to you, like, "Oh, you only got hired because of such and such reason"?
I mean, it doesn't happen often. I don't think logical people really think like
Of
that.
course not. No.
And it was actually a black guy that said that to me. It was actually an ethnic person, a fellow ethnic person who said that to me, which kind of, for me, I'm going to try and be careful what I say. For me, it, just don't offend anybody, but for me, it was more, okay, so you're saying there's not enough opportunities for ethnic people, I presume. But then when an ethnic person, a fellow, mixed race or black person or ethnic person does get this job, you almost want to tear them down and make them feel like the only reason they got that job is because of their skin color. But at the same time, I went on the guy's Twitter and you're talking about more opportunities for ethnic people. That to me doesn't make sense,
It
because
doesn't
when
at all.
someone gets that role, just congratulate them,
Yeah.
just congratulations, and be happy that there are more ethnic people in the media or getting to be in the media. So
It's so true. But
I let it go over my head
yeah,
though.
exactly. I was about to say, yeah, you have to
You can't
nowadays.
think like that. Yeah.
No, just keep being you. I've realised. Just don't let social media affect you. I know obviously it's harder
Yeah.
for some people, obviously, but it's just I realised that don't let social media get to you, because most of the time it's you do see people living these kind of, as you already know, it's really sad. People living that kind of fake life on social media where everything's perfect, they look perfect, they got millions of pounds in the bank, they got like living this lush life and really unhappy. So just do what makes you happy. I realise, and don't let social media dictate your life.
Yes, and that's been the biggest lesson for me this year. I'm still getting there. I do worry about putting things out there sometimes, and what will people think? And I think that's natural, because now, when 10 years ago, 20 years ago, not everyone had a platform. You didn't have 1,000 people looking at what you were doing, or something you said wasn't seen by 10,000+ people. So now almost everybody has a platform and everybody is on a stage, so to speak, when you've got social media. And you do worry, you don't, like I said, even there, I don't want to offend the person by saying that, but my point of view is, and it's hard, especially as a journalist. You're meant to be impartial, so you have to find that balance between having your own opinions, which everyone has a right to, but also being mindful of the fact that you're just there to tell the facts. You're not there to stir up,
Of course.
trouble. You're not meant to be.
Of course. I mean, how do you find it then when, say, a person gets into a great position in life where they got a higher powered job, only for someone to go back to, say, their Twitter from like, say, 10 years ago to dig up an old tweet which meant something completely random? What's your take on these sort of situations?
I think now that we know people do that, I would recommend everybody has a good deep clean of their old social media
Yeah.
profiles, because you never know. I think we've all probably said something that would not be acceptable now on our social media 10+ years ago. I'm sure that every single person has. I don't agree with doing that to people personally, because everyone evolves, and unless you're saying something in the here and now that's really offensive, I just think, and who has the time?
I
Like,
know.
who has the time to sit and scroll? That would take hours.
It
So,
would.
so I just think, yeah, let people be, unless they're doing something now, or they're a known, say, racist or homophobic person from, like, in the present, then I would say just leave it. But now that we know that that can happen, I would recommend everyone just goes through their social media and really has a good clean out
Of course.
of any posts.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time, do you think, obviously, there are some blatant, obviously, bad tweets or posts on Facebook and so forth that are blatantly bad? A lot of the time, though, do you think some posts might get misconstrued and completely taken out of the wrong context, do you think? That causes the person to lose their job?
Mm. Oh, it's a hard one, because I think you've got to be mindful, of what you're
Yeah.
putting online. And because, again, you're on a platform that serves so many different people, what you and your friends or your, how to explain? So everyone has like their pool and their network of people. And I think nowadays, and that's another thing that they brought up in the social dilemma, is that now we tend to try and keep ourselves within people who agree with similar opinions as us and have similar interests, and which is great. Find your tribe, but at the same time, you have to be mindful of the fact that more people might see that post who might not understand where you're coming from or who might take offense to it. So it is, again, it's finding that balance between censoring yourself, and nobody should have to completely censor themselves, but then at the same time also being able to post what they like, if that makes sense. So it's difficult, but I would just say everyone should be a little bit mindful about what they're putting out there now.
Of course. I've always felt that way as well, where whatever I've posted, I've always been very mindful of it. I haven't put anything at all to obviously offend anyone, or I've always tried to like make people laugh or smile or inspire them in some way, but I never put anything in that sense, which is why I couldn't agree more with what you said. Just be mindful of what you do post out there.
Yeah.
Be very careful. And if, say, you did put anything that might cause offense, from years ago, I had a very deep clean of your social media platforms.
Yes, exactly. Just make sure that, you know, if there are any posts that you can think of, I would, you know, get rid of them, or just have a double check, because times have changed. They're inevitably going to change in the next 10 to 20 years. And again, what was acceptable in our parents' time, or even when I was younger, probably wouldn't be as acceptable now in some way, shape, or form. So yeah, I would just say try and be a little bit mindful.
Of course. And growing up for you, actually, going back to a little bit now in time, growing up, were there any kind of stories or moments that really inspired you to be who you are today in terms of being a researcher and journalist?
I think me being I grew up in such a kind of, I grew up in a council estate in Newcastle, but I've grown up around so many different people. Like some of my friends, well, it was in Newcastle, I moved to Edinburgh. So I'll start with Newcastle. Newcastle is a slightly poorer area, I would say, or poorer city than what Edinburgh is. Edinburgh's known to be quite a wealthy, financial based city. So in Newcastle, even though I grew up with friends who had, you know, two parents, a fair bit of money, a big house, and then I also grew up with friends who lived in council houses. And my mum worked very hard and saved up and bought the council house for herself. But when I came to Edinburgh, that for me was an eye-opener, because my friends from school were living in like 5-bedroom mansions on a place called Mansion House Road, and I'd never seen a 5 or 6 bedroom mansion in my life. But they went to my school. It wasn't a private school, it was a state school. And I think just growing up around so many different people, and then for myself being mixed race and growing up just around so many different personalities and cultures, it really has always interested me since a very young age to speak to people and get to know their story. And just as I got older, I guess I wanted to tell that story. My grandma's always encouraged me. She speaks to everybody. So she's always encouraged me to talk to people.
That's brilliant. And how do you feel now that you've kind of reached what you always wanted to be now? How do you feel?
I still never feel that way, actually. Like, although I have reached where I want to be, I'm very stubborn and I always feel like I should be doing more, and I'm very ambitious. So thank you for saying that. But it's great. Like, I'm really proud of myself. I've got to where I want to be. I've always wanted to work in the media, like I've said. So it's great to be on that path, but I do still have a long way to go. I do still have a lot to learn, and hopefully I'll get there.
You will.
Thank you. But yeah, no, hopefully I'll get there. But it's a great feeling. I think when you've achieved anything that you want to do, it's a great feeling.
For sure. And what does the future hold for you? What is your future plans from now?
So my goal, and I'm not really ashamed to say this anymore, my goal is to probably be a correspondent or a reporter. I do like to also make content as well, so I would love to produce documentaries. So I'd love to get into documentary making or present documentaries. I also want to be a reporter and still do the journalism side of it. So just telling people's stories in whatever way that I can, but I want to grow the platform as much as possible in my platform and really be able to reach a lot of different people with a lot of different experiences.
Wow,
So
that sounds amazing. That sounds so good. What kind of Oh, fingers crossed for you. You'll definitely get there. What kind of documentaries do you have in mind that you like to make?
I always just have ideas brimming. I really need to get better at writing them down because I'll sit there and I'll think of like 10 different things. I would love to go to different countries and really, so say like in Syria, and obviously that's a bit difficult, but I would love to be not quite a war correspondent. I'm not as fearless as that, but I would love to go to different countries and film different people's culture and what they go through, and be able to tell that story, especially after coronavirus where we've been kind of locked in the UK. I would love to break out and travel with it. Again, I like to tell society stories, so what's really going on. I think we walk around sometimes and think that everyone's got a similar life to us, or everybody's kind of got not the same amount of money and material objects, but we tend to think that, well, if I'm good, then a lot of other people, you know, you don't sometimes get out of your own head. So I would like to tell our country's stories as well. So yeah, like I said, I always have different ideas.
Oh, but Olivia, I've been so lovely to talk to you today, though, and I really admire your work. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. And how can people find you online?
So you can find me on Twitter, just at Olivia Otigbah. I don't have a very creative Twitter handle. Instagram as well, it's just at Olivia Otigbah. I've got my own website, www.oliviaotigbah.com, and also on YouTube under Olivia Otigbah Presents. So you can find all my work there.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you so much. Olivia,
Well,
take care. Nice to speak to you soon. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye, everyone.